Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody can hear. I'm not sure that we necessarily need to go through an entire roll call, but if anybody out there can speak up and let me know that we are audible, I would appreciate it.
Even Garden City, I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, well, great. At least Garden City's on. Nick, are we muting them or?
Mute them as they come out.
Okay. So on our end, we will try muting your line. That way we don't have any back noise. But at some point throughout this, we will stop to take questions, unmute lines. But the goal of this morning is to update you what we know differently today that we did not know at our first face-to-face meeting. We have a few people this morning that are going to walk you through some updates. This is very informal. Actually, if you have questions, Nick, how will we?
I can read them off.
Okay.
Or they can unmute themselves.
Okay, so you can go through, unmute yourself, but we're just going to do this very informally. Just try to share with you some additional information, kind of the work that has taken place. We've had several subgroups, some things that we have found out, not necessarily new, but a lot of work has been taking place since the last time we met. So I really don't anticipate this taking more than an hour, but we've set aside a couple hours just to hopefully when we're done to make sure that you're up to date. You know what the timeline is, what our next steps are, and kind of where we're headed. So with that, Nick, you want to go to the next slide? All right, we also had, this is Brad talking. We also, not that that was a surprise to anybody, but we also have Tate, Tammy, Beth, and Colleen all here at the table ready to give you some updates. So I'm going to turn it over first to Tate.
Okay. Here, just kind of have our agenda for the next 45 minutes to an hour. We're going to start with the 2016-17, a couple things that will be implemented this next school year. Then we'll go on and talk about the 17-18 implementation. Our focus is going to be the title programs, Kansas Learning Network, and the building report cards and what changes will be occurring. Then we have a short time that will give you time for questions, where like Brad said, you can unmute and ask, or you can type them in the chat feature and Nick will share them with us. And then Colleen will wrap us up at the end of this session. So as everybody knows, this is the Every Student Succeeds Act. A lot of times you'll hear it considered ESSA, but it is the reauthorization of the ESSA, Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And the first few minutes today, we're going to talk about the implementation that will be occurring in the 2016-17 school year. Pretty much as far as title services are, there's going to be two areas that you'll see implementation in. The first one under Title I Part A will be the comprehensive support and improvement, which is led by our Kansas Learning Network, and Tammy will provide more information about that. And then the other title program is Title IX, which is the Part A McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. Because this is not part of ESSA, but is a standalone act, it actually is going to be implemented for the 16-17 school year. On March 17th, the Department of Ed published in the Federal Register the publication with the beginning guidance for the McKinney-Vento program that we're going through. We're comparing to what was in the law, and we're going to start providing more technical assistance, sending stuff out on listservs, since we're just a few months away from this being implemented. So as we do this, it's going to be very important that current liaisons are on the list, because there are some very important changes that are going to affect these. As it states on that slide, it does become effective July 1st, 2016, with one minor thing not going into effect in Kansas till December 10th, 2016. One of the parts of the definition is a student who is awaiting foster care is considered a homeless student. After December 10th of 2016, awaiting foster care is being removed from the law, and it will no longer be serving those. Kansas, along with most of the nation, it's the December 16 date. A couple states, it won't be till the following year, but for the rest of us, it will start this year. This shouldn't have a large effect on districts, but it's going to be important for liaisons to know this and understand this. And starting in the 17-18 school year, these kids will be covered under Title I, which we'll talk a little bit more later when we talk about the 17-18 implementation. So the main things that we know of already in McKinney-Vento that will be changing, and there'll be many more throughout the next couple months that we send out and work with our liaisons with. The biggest one is professional development is now an annual requirement for all liaisons, and that is to be state determined. So right now we're working at the state and with a couple small external groups, and are also looking for feedback from this group if you have anything to share, is what should this professional development look like? Should it be webinars? Should it be in-person regional meetings? Should it be part of state conferences? Those are things we need to know, because the groups I typically get to work with are our bigger districts, and we know that's not extremely representative. And so we need to look at what would be effective for all districts. But this is one big key for districts to understand as they determine who their liaison is that they will have professional development requirements. Another piece is previously for preschool students, there was not a school of origin, and now there will be. The biggest effect of this will end up being transportation, because if a preschooler moves and is in need of transportation, they have the right to stay in that preschool, and it will become the district's responsibility to transport. With our K through 12 kids, that hasn't been as big of a deal, but with more rules and regulations on how we transport preschool students, this is going to be important for especially our larger districts with larger amounts of preschoolers who may be homeless, important for them to know. Another piece that also is important with transportation is that students will have the right to get transportation for the remainder of the school year, even after they have become permanently housed. So a student that is receiving transportation back to their school of origin, even once they become permanently housed, if that school is still the best interest and the parents want them attending there, the district will now have to provide that transportation. In the past, they may provide transportation, and many districts went ahead and did this, but now we'll be required to. And with school of origin in the new law, it states that the school of origin is the best interest school unless there's parental objections. So that's a big change. Usually the parents had the last say, but now we're supposed to consider school of origin from the get-go. And there'll be a lot more training and information coming out about how we should determine this and how we should work with families when we're looking at keeping them in the schools of origin. As we go forward, like I said, there's going to be a lot of updates and trainings that will be sent out on listservs. And just in generally, there's going to be a lot more webinars on all these topics, fact sheets, FAQ sheets coming out in the next 18 months. We also have the Wednesday hot topics that are the first and third Wednesdays that come out through the Division of Learning Services. This summer, there'll also be presentations at the Impact Institutes in Emporia on June 14th and 15th, and in Hayes on July 6th and 7th, and also at our Leadership Conference in Wichita on July 27th and 28th. Later on, we'll also have a slide with the email address of essaquestions@ksde.org. Anytime you have questions or your staff or people in the field may have questions, you can direct them to that email, and we'll be answering questions from there and also determining our FAQ sheets, questions and answers for that also.
Okay, well, this is Tammy, and we're going to talk a little bit about schools on improvement in the Kansas Learning Network. Our KLN Subcommittee met a few weeks ago, and we had some really good conversation, kind of piggybacking on the work that we all did together as a large group. I think it was in late January, early February. But one of the directions we really want to go in Kansas, and the subcommittee completely agrees, and we really want to get the word out, is that we really need to change the conversation in Kansas. And instead of saying we've got low performing schools, in Kansas, we have schools that have multiple risk factors that impact student achievement. And so what we want to do is we want to focus on causes instead of results. We want to make this conversation more about communities and what support communities need and neighborhoods need, instead of labeling districts, schools, and teachers as failing. The ESSA law and Title I services is kind of a broad set of laws that are supposed to meet the needs of students in inner city Detroit, New York City, Los Angeles, and Kansas. And our schools in Kansas aren't failing, but we do have communities that have needs. And so we want to provide resources and supports to districts and schools that have the highest needs. We kind of fleshed this out a little bit more in our KLN subcommittee, but that conversation really began with our whole group. So some of the work that we've been talking about is how are we going to identify a new cohort of schools that the Kansas Learning Network will support. And so for the 2016-2017 school year, we do, oh, thank you for changing that. We do have, here's a general timeline. Again, some of these things are still subject to change, but we expect to be able to identify and notify districts and schools whether they're eligible for comprehensive support or improvement in August or September. Those schools and the districts that support them will be eligible for 1003 school improvement funding, and those applications will be ready as soon as we can notify schools and districts. I put October, but I can probably have those ready just as soon as we have schools identified. That is a little inconvenient for districts right now because they've been used to planning ahead and thinking and knowing for sure that they have these school improvement dollars. And now, they're not going to know those exact amounts until we have a new cohort identified. In 2016-17, the Kansas Learning Network supports will begin, and our KLN implementation coaches will be helping districts and schools with a district and building needs assessment. That needs assessment will be the same needs assessment as what is organized and required under the Kansas education systems accreditation. So it's the same whether we're talking about Kansas accreditation or KLN, it's the same needs assessment. There isn't a need to have multiple needs assessments. That's just kind of redundant work, so we're streamlining that a bit. Our coaches will help districts and schools with a root cause analysis and data work. We want to honor the work that's been done by districts and schools instead of requiring schools and districts to start from scratch. And then the district and building improvement plans will be created based on those needs assessment and the data work. So just really working to tightly align the support in ways that create freedom for schools to do the work instead of doing the paperwork to talk about the work. So that's 16-17. But I wanted to share with you some ideas that so we're talking about how are we going to identify these schools, and the law says that we need to identify a minimum of 5%, and it also says lowest performing Title I schools. But when we want to change the conversation in Kansas, and so this KLN subcommittee has been working, and we'll meet again in May to look at some models and examples. But right now, what we're thinking is we're going to use what we're calling tentatively now academic plus methodology. And so we're looking at using 51% of a formula where we would take 2015 and 2016 state assessment data using the API, the Academic Performance Index, and that's for math and English language arts. And that would be 51% of the weighting. And then the 49%, we want to look at risk factors that impact student achievement in math and English language arts. And some of these may include poverty or cumulative poverty, mobility, English language learners, students with disabilities, attendance, migrant students, teacher equity, suspension and expulsion, and other data points. Now the KLN subcommittee will meet in May and look at models. And so we've got someone here on staff, Tony, who's working diligently to put together spreadsheets and data and examples so that this committee can look and see, you know, how many risk factors, who shows up on different lists depending on the risk factors. The KLN subcommittee, and then ultimately this committee, the ESSA advisory committee, you guys will be the ones to let us know how many of these risk factors should we take into account when we create a list. We're not going to make that determination, but we will make that based off of your feedback, and the KLN subcommittee will be looking at those models in May. We're really excited about this because we think that this will really get to the heart of who really needs the additional support and a little smidge of additional funding. And so to be continued, we'll keep you posted as this subcommittee meets and does additional work.
Okay, my name's Beth Fultz, and I work in assessments, and I work on the report card side of reporting the assessment data. So I'm going to talk to you today just a little bit about some of the things that stay the same with the ESSA reauthorization and how we plan to implement the requirements in the law. So we're still required to publish every year a report card that reports out building, district, and state data. As in the past, we've had to report out academic proficiency on state assessments. That won't change. Graduation rates, we've been reporting that for several years. English language proficiency has moved to a prominent spot in the report card, and we'll be working on reporting the proficiency rates on the ALPA 21 test. Growth, or another statewide measure of academics in K-8. Because, you know, we have graduation at high school, so there has to be another measure at K-8, and they've said it needs to be academic related. And then a new feature in the law says that we can use not less than one other state indicator of school quality or student success. So, and then finally, what's been a constant for several years is that we have to report out the participation rate. In this law, it specifically says that we have to identify all of these factors in the aggregate and then by subgroup. And then there's some other reporting features that will go on the report card that will be, it's information that KSD has been collecting and putting in different places on our website, and this will allow us to bring everything together under the building report card. If you'll remember, last year we rolled out the new look of the dashboard for the building report card, and we just envision the dashboard expanding each year as we add the components that we're required to share. Okay, so for the 15-16 report card, we will report, like we did and with the 14-15 data, the assessment participation rates. We will report graduation rates for high schools. And this year we will also report, last year we reported only the participation assessment data. This year we will add the accountability population. So if you'll think back to we're reworking the business rules, but it will be something similar as to students have to be accounted for at the September 20 count and still be included in the school's enrollment population when the test is administered. And that basically, with some exceptions and different nuances, would be the accountability population. And then as long as the student's there between 9/20 and the need not test date, then that's your building report card participation. That's what we calculate the participation rate on. So we'll start sharing that information on the accountability population with you after we have 2 years of data. And then the 16-17 year, we will actually, when we put the academic proficiency data, the accountability population, we will at that point identify what's required in the new law as some long-term measurable goals. Also, we will be able to share with you the English language proficiency data at that point. We're going to try very hard. It won't probably, the ALPA 21 data probably won't be available when we release the report card for 15-16, but we hope to have it posted during the year, and then we'll be able to have 2 years of data when we post the 16-17 data.
Okay, now we're going to go into the 2017-2018 and the implementation of the majority of the ESSA reauthorization. And on this first slide, we're talking about Title I. We show the 3 major subparts of Title I. Part A, which is now called Improving Basic Programs Operated by State and Local Agencies, which was previously the disadvantaged ones. This is what we've always referred to just as our main Title I program. As we mentioned previously, the biggest change here is with the comprehensive support for schools that KLN and Tammy are leading. There's also some good clarifications on how targeted assisted schools may use their funds and school-wides may use it. Definitely there's still the stress on the academic needs of the students, but as you start seeing more stuff come out toward the end of the 16-17 year, as we're putting out information for 17-18, districts will have some other opportunities of look at what their students need and how these funds may be used. There's will also be a lot of other little minor things that we start clarifying. And along with Title I, as we go through the rest of these, one of the things you won't see is a lot of information coming from us now. We're doing a lot of internal work, but we don't want people to be confused during next year as we put out new fact sheets, thinking they can use this for these type of things in 16-17. Because under 16-17, we're still under the No Child Left Behind requirements and how funds may be spent. Title I Part C, which is our migrant program. For the most part, again, there's not a lot of major changes. However, the state of Kansas is going to be in a hold harmless funding place. The biggest issue there is we're looking at, for the next few years, probably taking $1 million cut each year. So even though we'll still have grants going out, there'll be large financial cuts of the state. So this will obviously have a trickle-down effect on our LEAs and how these funds are used. Most of that information from our team will be coming from Doug Bowling. And then the last part up here is Part D, which is our neglected or delinquent program that Lori Hauk helps oversee. Again, there's just some minor changes. This is more specific to the districts that receive these funds. So even though there will be some new fact sheets being developed, a lot of that will be sent out directly to those districts involved in those programs, but all of the information will be available on our website as these fact sheets and information are put out. The next title, Title II, which is usually what most people think of as our professional development and class size reduction. It's the preparing, training, and recruiting high-quality teachers, principals, and other school leaders. This title was completely rewritten for the new law. Many of the same uses of the funds will also be available under the new Title II. However, there'll be a lot more opportunities and ways these funds can be used. This is a prime example of the type of programs that we're going to have fact sheets ready within the next probably 2 to 4 months, but we're not going to be releasing because there'll be so many other uses of these funds for the 17-18 year. And we want to put it out at a time in the spring where people can plan for 17-18, but not too early in the school year, or there's that confusion of people thinking they can spend those funds next year. So again, this is the 17-18 school year that we're talking about, these type of things. With Title III, there's 2 big changes. Again, there's going to be unique things that come out from our department, from Julie Ewing, especially our Title III consultant. But the terminology that we use now, English language learners, has been changed to English learners. So that's one thing you'll see. It doesn't change the definition or anything. It's just the terminology. And the majority of the accountability for Title III is no longer in Title III. It's now part of Title I, which strengthens that. And it goes along with what Beth was talking about on those report cards. There's actually a little more accountability with Title III, but it's actually now in the Title I law. With Title IV, previously, when this was funded before it was safe and drug-free, this is going to be a new formula grant, and it's going to be considered student support and academic enrichment. That technically all districts will be eligible for funds. However, with this formula grant, and there's still a lot of work being done at the federal level, we're waiting for a lot of guidance on this, and there's actually still debate on the amount of funding. The Department of Ed actually did not ask for as much funding as Congress was hoping they would ask for in this program. And so that will also have some effects on things. But it's also going to be one of the most complicated formula grants of all the title programs. There'll be different determinations of what districts are required to do based on the amount of funding they get. The lowest amount of a grant will be $10,000. So any district that receives or is eligible for under $10,000 will have to be part of a consortium to receive these funds. Very similar to what we have currently do with our Title III funds that our districts have less than $10,000 allocated to them. There's going to be 3 areas under Title IV where funds may be spent. One section is considered well-rounded education, and then there'll be different subcategories under that. Healthy and safe environment, and then technology and professional development for effective use of data and technology. One thing that is, we've been going through this, what we've seen is a lot of previously competitive grants are no longer out there as competitive grants, but are now options under the new student support and academic enrichment grants. So there could be programs in your district receiving small grants they will no longer be eligible for because these grants won't be available, but those same uses might be available under Title IV. And then the last titles, which these have typically Titles 5 through 8, lesser effects on some districts. The previous Title V was completely eliminated. So from here on out, if you're well versed in the titles, they've moved up. What Title V is now, or will be in 2017-18, was previously Title VI. And it's state innovation and local flexibility. Basically, the main thing this takes into account is since the rules from the ESSA waivers in as of August 1st of 2016, the transferability rule is now in Title V for the 2017-2018 school year, which will allow districts to transfer their Title II and Title IV funds into Title I if they choose to. So they may transfer up to 100%, similar to in the waivers. Previously, before the waivers, it was 50%, and depending on school improvement rules, it could have been less than that, depending on the district, but now it'll be 100%. And then for our smaller school districts that have the REAP programs, such as Small Rural School Achievement Program, SRSA, and the Rural Low Income Schools, RLIS, these are still in existence. Pretty much they will have the same rules as previously, where typically Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV activities are what these funds have to be used on. Some districts qualify for both and will continue to qualify for both, but you're only allowed to accept one of those two grants. And Nicole Clark in our office typically handles the financial part of that if districts have questions, and I usually work with the program end of that. With Title VI, Indian, Native, Hawaiian, and Alaska Native education, the Indian education piece is the piece that affects our Kansas school districts. As we've been looking toward this, a lot of this is terminology and phrasing changes. But one thing is that we've gone through this and looked at our state data is that to qualify for one of these grants, a district has to have 10 Native Indians or more based on the definition. And as we look at district demographics, we have found that about 40 districts possibly qualify for this, but only about 14 are accepting it. So we're going to try to reach out to districts and make sure they understand that they qualify for this, because it's possible some of these districts do not know they qualify, or it's possible they qualify and have chosen not to take the funds. But we want to work with the districts that qualify and provide them the information necessary to see if they are interested. Title VII is our impact aid, which is our aid that comes from the federal government because of federal lands. Our two major districts that this affects is Gary County and Fort Leavenworth, but there are other districts that are also affected by this. Dean Zeitz on our team and Craig Neuenswander in school finance are the two main people heading this. They're making sure that what changes are in there. A lot of it's percentages, and they're looking at that, trying to determine how that'll affect the district. They're going to be the ones sending out the information about this. Title VIII is just the general provisions. Again, there won't be a lot from this section coming out to districts, but we will continue to update people and districts on what they need to know from this. And then the last title is Title IX, which this section that has some reauthorizations of programs not under ESSA, just some clarifications in different laws. It also has some possible grants for preschool systems that are at the state level. It also reauthorizes the Ed Flex law, which Kansas is part of the Ed Flex, and we will continue to be that way. So there'll be no changes for the state of Kansas in that, but it gives other options to those states that currently do not have are part of the EdFlex partnership. And then one of the last parts of this addresses all of the other laws that have definitions that need to be changed based on the changes of ESSA. So for the majority of school districts, other than the extra uses of Title II and the new Title IV formula, there's not a lot that's going to have to change with most of the Titles 1 through 4, when you don't look at the comprehensive needs schools. And so that is a really quick overview of Titles 1 through 9 and their effective date. And I'm going to go ahead and let Tammy talk about what changes will be happening with the comprehensive schools as we go into 17-18.
So as I explained earlier, for 16-17, we will be using data to identify a new cohort of schools that we'll be working with. But in 17-18, we will have the opportunity to rerun the formulas using API from, we will have the 2015, 2016, and we'll be able to add 2017. And we will use the risk factors that the subcommittee approves. So we're going to rerun a new list for 17-18, and it may increase the number of schools that are eligible for this comprehensive support and improvement. One of the things that we want to do is make sure that if schools and districts are identified in 16-17, they're not just dropped. There was a concern that, you know, why would we identify for 1 year and they only get support for 1 year, when we know that best practice is to work with districts for 3 years or more on a comprehensive improvement plan. So we can talk more about this, but by doing it this way, we can keep consistency within those districts. But we can also make sure that we use 3 years of data to make sure we actually get all of the schools that need additional support and additional funding. So we'll talk more about that as the time gets closer. This may also mean that we will identify a few more than just 5%. We'll have a group or a cluster of schools that we'll be working with. And then this list will be consistent. We will not re-identify a new group until we use a formula in 2020. So, so then, you know, KLN will be set, the work will continue, the support can be counted on throughout that cohort time period, and then in 2020 we'll run the formulas again. So another thing that we can count on for 17-18 and beyond is that this group of schools will be eligible for the 1003 school improvement funds. Those applications will go out in September or October as soon as we know our numbers and can prepare that. And the Kansas Learning Network support continues. Additional things that we'll need to be thinking about as an advisory group, we'll want to be talking a little bit in the future about exit criteria. And we'll also be talking a bit more about that group of targeted support and improvement. In 17-18, we'll need to notify districts that they have schools that have gaps with their subgroups. But again, a lot of that, we don't have a lot of details on that to share, and those are things that we'll want to talk about with you all before final decisions are made.
Okay, so that leads us then to the reporting for 17-18. So in 17-18, we'll be able to let schools know if they're making progress towards their long-term measurable goal. Remember, we'll identify the goal the previous year, and then in 17-18, we'll be able to identify some progress. We'll also have enough data at that point to calculate growth or the other statewide academic indicator that's selected. And then we'll also, at that time, we feel like we'll be ready to identify and report on the other school quality or student success indicator that we're required to provide.
The question is, are we going to take into consideration early childhood as a risk factor. We can't at this time, but with the board's new outcomes, one of those being kindergarten readiness, we can foresee 3-4 years down the road, if we have viable data, then yes, that is something that we could add to the risk factors. But currently as a state, we don't collect building-wise or district-wise any number on that, but that is a goal in the future.
However, our team will continue to work with districts to implement quality, evidence-based programs in the area of early childhood in order to help support the readiness for kindergarten on behalf of students, families, as well as educators, because we've got to think about the students who are coming into our school and making sure that our schools are also ready to accept the students that we have in our communities. So there will be lots of conversations with you as well as other stakeholders about our early childhood and how to implement what Brad has mentioned as the board priority of kindergarten readiness. We're just not quite sure that that needs to be something that's included in ESSA. That said, however, if there are grant opportunities that we can apply for as a state and have some collaborative opportunities to work with other state agencies, private partners to support you in your districts and in your communities to enhance your early childhood programs, we are going to be all over those opportunities. So that's one of those areas that we just need to watch and listen and know that it's on our radar screen. If you see something and you have specific questions, you can feel free to direct those to myself, to Brad, to Tammy. We are all focused on this early childhood and kindergarten readiness opportunity that we have to really enhance the good quality programs we've already got in place within our state. Other questions? Okay, so until we have other questions, we'll continue. And the next bullet item really does address what we want to do. Tammy mentioned that we are trying to change the conversation. We are moving away from the punitive perception, the punitive nature of No Child Left Behind, to a more collaborative support to schools and districts in the Every Student Will Succeed Act. And we are looking for feedback from all of you in order to do that, but that's where we're changing the conversation at the KSDE as well, to providing support rather than being punitive in the risk factors that are identified.
That is actually part of the new Title II. Paraprofessionals are mentioned under that, and that will be an option with the Title II funds, is to provide that professional development to paraprofessionals along with teaching staff and administrative staff.
One of the things that we're going to be particularly intentional about, though, from KSDE is we will provide professional learning to districts, and districts will be able to make local decisions about the staff that are invited for those opportunities to participate. We would hope that paraprofessionals are included in that, but I don't see that being a mandate from KSDE. So as far as future opportunities to participate in ongoing conversations and meetings, Tate really mentioned some very good methods of communication that we currently have in place with our newsletters and our listservs. But I wanted to highlight a couple of other opportunities, and I do appreciate that Tate also mentioned the Impact Institutes that will be coming up this summer and are already scheduled in 2 different locations. Please continue to look at Brad's webpage in particular for ongoing updates and announcements about those Impact Institutes and other professional learning. In addition, we have monthly Title I Directors webinars, and though the next one will be held on April 8th, at 11 a.m. And then a follow-up Title I Director monthly webinar will be on May 6th at 11 o'clock. Those webinars are open to our Kansas educators across the state. We send out notices about those webinars on our Exit News, as well as that information can be found from any member of our Early Childhood Special Education and Title Services team. Tate also mentioned the DLS Lunchtime Hot Topics. We will be providing ESSA updates the first and third Wednesday in those hot topic opportunities. Brad's newsletter is always full of good information, including the, we will also include the ESSA updates on those as well. So with that, here is the website where you can submit questions. The first website, the KSDE website, we set up specifically to have questions come to us at KSDE as to how we are going to interpret the information that is currently out on ESSA implementation. And those questions actually come directly to Tate, so just so you know who's behind the website. And then the U.S. Department of Education has also set up a similar website. So if you have questions, comments, or you want to comment about the regulations once those are posted, we encourage you to submit those questions to the ESSA questions at ed.gov mailbox.
This is just where we are today. Again, for example, Tammy will be bringing her subcommittee specifically around identifying the 5%. We'll be meeting again in May face-to-face to really, excuse me.
Webinar, I was going to mention it.
Well, we have a webinar, but Tammy's subcommittee is coming in, isn't it, in May,
Yes.
face-to-face, the subcommittee. And then ultimately, we will be bringing all of these recommendations to this group to put together a proposal that'll go forward for Kansas. So we really appreciate you joining us today. Looks like we may have another question. That's a great question. That's why we're trying to reach out to all of our associations to get their input. We hope that those of you on this advisory committee, you represent a large population of Kansans. We hope that you're taking what we're discussing, having conversations locally with your constituents, and you're really the voice of the people that are mentioned in ESSA. We have a really good diversity of constituents on this advisory council, but this isn't the only group either that we're communicating with. But if you have any suggestions, please send them to us.
We also encourage you to share this information with your constituency groups and encourage people to submit questions to us at KSDE. We want to be very intentional about implementing ESSA in a manner that works for Kansas. And we believe very strongly that there is flexibility to be able to do that. There are title requirements, as Tate went through very, very intentionally, and we will continue to share those with the field as we gain information. But there is going to be a lot more flexibility to reduce the federal requirements, but maximize the federal investments in order to meet the needs that we have in Kansas. And so we strongly encourage you to share this information across your districts and across your constituency groups that you represent in your membership on this council. You know, we very much value your involvement and participation, not just with the information we provide you, but how you can take that information and share it with broader groups. Brad mentioned future meetings, and he mentioned the face-to-face subcommittee meeting that Tammy's going to be holding. Our next meeting with you as the ESSA Advisory Council will be in the format of a webinar, and that webinar will be May 12th from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, similar to today. And we are hopeful that we will have a lot more detail about the implementation for 2016 and 17 at that time. Additionally, we have set up a face-to-face meeting with all of you that will coincide with our leadership conference that will be held in July in Wichita. That face-to-face meeting of the Kansas ESSA Advisory Council will be held July 26th from 8:30 to 1 p.m. at the Hyatt Regency in Wichita. But lots more information about that will be forthcoming.
Any other questions? Great. And again, this needs to be a very fluid process to where when you're sharing with the people you represent or the people that you communicate with, we're hoping that you are the conduit from their voice back to us through this process. So as Colleen mentioned, we want this to be what Kansans want. That's why that's why we have this advisory council, as well as in front of just, we'll be in front of superintendent's council, curriculum leaders, testing coordinators as much as we can, just to get the voice, as well as the state board. Anybody else have anything? Again, here in a few days, once Nick is able to compile this, we'll get it posted and send it out that way for people that weren't able to attend, or if you want to share this again, it'll be available.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. Well, we thank everybody, and if anything comes up, please let us know. Bye.